In 4 years' time, this man suffered the loss of 2 wives, and his business went bankrupt.
You gotta say, this guy's gotta be the most unlucky person in the world.
Was it bad luck, or, as one forensic scientist asked, was it too coincidental? 1994, 36-year-old Tim Boskowski and his 3 children moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to begin a new life. Just a few months earlier in North Carolina, Tim suffered the dual loss of his business and the accidental death of his wife, Elaine.
There's things you learn in life that only your mom could teach you. I'll never have a chance to find those things out.
The memories will never go away, but you kind of like had to put a backseat to that and kind of like move on.
Tim started a small company to make crowns and bridges for local dentists. And just 7 months after the death of his wife, he met 32-year-old Mary Ann Fullerton.
She met him at a dance. She came home all excited, saying she met the most wonderful man at the Catholic Singles Club that night. And all her friends figured, you know, they hadn't seen her that excited in a while, and it just might be the person.
Mother, per se.
There's Sandy and Todd. Todd, what do you have? Explain what you're going to do.
But just 18 months after the wedding, tragedy struck Tim Boskowski yet again. Shortly after midnight, on November 7th, 1994, Tim found his wife unconscious in the family hot tub.
Is the patient conscious right now? No. Okay. Is she breathing? I don't think so. They're trying to get her out of the water. Okay. Get her out of the water.
Mary Ann was rushed to the trauma center of Allegheny General Hospital, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead.
It's probably the worst feeling in the world.
Tim told police that he and Mary Ann went into the hot tub together around 11 o'clock. They ignored or were unaware of safety warnings that they should spend no longer than 10 or 15 minutes in the hot water. And doctors warned against drinking alcohol in a hot tub. Tim and Mary Ann stayed in for over an hour, and Tim admitted the two had been drinking.
He was really pushing the fact that she was drinking heavily. 13 to 15 beers. Well, that's a lot of beer.
Later, Tim left to take a shower, and he said Mary Ann stayed behind. When Tim returned 20 minutes later, he found Mary Ann's lifeless body in the water.
She was immersed in a hot tub, the spa that had a temperature of approximately 104 degrees. The outside air in early November was in the 30s. She probably attempted to get out of the tub and had an episode of lightheadedness because of the blood rushing out to the cold extremities, and had a fainting spell, fell into the tub, and drowned.
Mary Ann's blood alcohol level was 0.22, over twice the legal limit of intoxication.
It's never pleasant nor easy to bash the deceased. They're not here to defend themselves, but the long and short of it in this case was that Mary Ann Boskowski did have a history of drinking. She had, I believe, 2 DUIs. We had an episode where we had witnesses that were in the choir with her at church were concerned about her drinking.
Once again, Tim Boskowski was a widower.
You gotta say, this guy's gotta be the most unlucky person in the world. To lose both wives in a 4-year period, how unlucky can you be?
On the night Mary Ann Boskowski died, police investigating the case were not sure whether it was a freak accident or something else. On the hot tub lay 2 wet beach towels. On the bottom of the tub lay the temperature gauge, which had broken loose from its housing, and a pair of women's eyeglasses. On the deck, officers also saw a wet pack of cigarettes, an ashtray, 2 cups, and a small box that held the breathing device Tim used to administer CPR on Mary Ann until paramedics arrived. The device typically is used on strangers to prevent disease.
That was suspicious. A person in his right mind would want to use this device on his own wife and take the time to leave her alone in that tub, to run down in the basement to find this thing, to bring it up.
Something else bothered police. A scratch on Tim Boskowski's neck. Detectives asked Tim to remove his shirt. They saw multiple scratches on both sides of his waist, his shoulder, and left thumb, and his left chin was bruised.
These superficial scratches on his back did not bleed. Okay, they were not surrounded by bruising or black and blue or hematoma contusions on his body. They were just little scratches.
Didn't necessarily take a trained police officer to figure out that there was really something wrong here.
Mary Ann's family was suspicious. They had heard rumors that Tim's first wife died under similar circumstances.
I asked Mary Ann, I said, I had heard that she had drowned in a bathtub. And Mary Ann said, oh, Aunt Ruth, she choked on something. And I said, what in the world was she eating in the bathtub that she would choke on? And she said, oh, I don't know. She said, Tim doesn't like to talk about it. He gets too upset.
Police in Greensboro, North Carolina confirmed that Tim's first wife, Elaine, died in a bathtub accident. 4 years earlier, Tim said Elaine was intoxicated when she came home from a church social function. Elaine went to take a bath. Tim said he went to bed. At the time, the couple's daughter Sandy was 6 years old. Both she and her father said they heard a loud noise in the bathroom.
I remember hearing a thud, and I remember getting up and being the one who woke my dad up.
Tim said the bathroom door was locked, which he forced open with a screwdriver. Inside, he found his wife on her back in the bathtub, unconscious, submerged in the water. Tim said he pulled her out of the tub and placed her over the shower door tracks to try to revive her.
He laid her across the tub, thinking that he could get the water out of her because he felt like she had swallowed water, and that was keeping her from breathing.
Paramedics rushed Elaine to the Wesley Long Community Hospital, where she was pronounced dead.
I was in admiration of Elaine. I admired her strength. I admired her freeness to laugh. She had such beautiful qualities.
At the scene, police found vomit in the bathtub from Tim's resuscitation efforts, but no water in the tub or nearby.
How do you get her out and not be wet? How do you get her out and not be water everywhere? Like, what happened to the water? That was the thing that kept freaking me out.
Even the shower door tracks were completely dry. Brenda Vance was a rookie police officer in 1990 and the same size as Tim's first wife, Elaine. Disturbed by the lack of water in the Boskowski bathroom, Vance conducted an experiment in her own home bathtub. The officer wanted to see how much water it took to submerge her head.
We start filling the tub up. When there's enough water in the tub that it starts getting up right here on my face, my head's floating up. An unconscious person is just going to float right up. So that didn't make any sense to me. Second thing was, before I could get enough water in there, the overflow valve was taking the water out. So I could never submerge myself in my tub. You know, we proved. His story just didn't hold water. No water there. It did not happen that way.
Elaine Boskowski's autopsy revealed no water in the airways. Forensic pathologists say water is not always present in the lungs of drowning victims. 3 parallel lines mark the lower chest and upper abdomen, consistent with the shower door tracks on the Boskowski's bathtub.
The explanations that he offered for the marks on the body couldn't be refuted by the autopsy findings. When he said, I put her over the edge of the tub to try to resuscitate her or an attempt to save her life, well, we have a mark that's consistent with putting a body over the edge of a tub.
The toxicology report showed Elaine's blood alcohol level was 0. She was not inebriated as Tim claimed. Despite the inconsistency, the coroner ruled the cause of death undetermined.
Well, you call it undetermined because I don't really believe his story, but I can't say that it didn't happen that way, but I'm suspicious, but you know, there's just not quite enough there.
I understand why she made the call that she did to begin with. I think, to answer your question directly, I think she did the best she could under the circumstances. I also believe that that she probably felt very badly, personally, when the second woman died.
But if Tim Boskowski got away with murder the first time, would he be lucky enough to get away with it again with wife number 2? Tim Boskowski had been married 2 times. Both wives died under suspicious circumstances. The first in a bathtub, the second in a hot tub. Friends and relatives say the 2 wives strongly resembled each other.
And they actually wore their hairstyle the same. It was ironic because they both wore glasses that were Coke bottle thick. And that was another similarity. Both of them were very much involved in the Catholic Church.
The investigation into the death of Tim's first wife was inconclusive. Investigators were hoping for more in the autopsy of Tim's second wife.
It is impossible to know exactly what happened, but we can piece together some things in an intelligent and logical fashion.
The medical examiner found 53 bruises externally and internally on the upper arms, the back, and the upper neck.
We find some bruising and hemorrhaging on the lips and at the base of the gums, at the inside bottom portion of the lips. Then we find these bruises on the arms that are strongly suggestive of fingernail impressions. We do have several areas of focal hemorrhage. In the neck, in those small muscles we call strap muscles because they resemble small, elongated, rectangular straps. And we find small hemorrhages in the surrounding soft tissues.
Pressure to the side of the neck halts the blood flow in the carotid artery to the brain, and pressure to the vagus nerve alongside the carotid slows the heart muscle and respiration.
Bradycardia, as we call it, that slowing of the heart can set the stage in some instances uncontrollably, unpredictably, quite erratically, of a cardiac arrhythmia, an abnormal beating of the heart. In other words, the heart just stops beating, the lungs then stop functioning, and in a matter of 4 to 6 minutes, you're dead.
Dr. Weck says Mary Ann Boskowski did not drown.
I think that Mr. Boskowski strangled her. I think he applied pressure to her neck. I think that he held her arms. He may well have held her underwater, although we don't have any definitive evidence of prolonged immersion in water. I think that it was a staged drowning. I think that the death is due to strangulation.
Mary Ann's blood alcohol level, 0.22, was proof she was intoxicated. Dr. Weck says being intoxicated made it difficult for Mary Ann to fight off her attacker. The official ruling? Asphyxiation due to compression of the neck.
As the medical evidence incontrovertibly in our minds indicated, he strangled her to death in plain English.
It's not that easy to get away with something the second or third time that you try to do it.
If Tim murdered both of his wives as alleged, what was the motive? When prosecutors interviewed Mary Ann Boskowski's family and friends, they learned that Tim and Mary Ann had recently been on a cruise, and all was not happy.
Mary Ann said, if things don't get better, by the time I get back, I can always leave, and I'm taking the children with me.
There was evidence Tim's first wife, Elaine, was planning to divorce him as well.
As a grown woman in her 30s, a mother, she was discovering rock and roll from the 60s and 70s. She was really pursuing a wholeness as an individual. I don't think he killed the woman that he married. I think he killed the woman he was afraid of.
Tim's first wife had no life insurance to speak of, but Tim purchased a $100,000 life insurance policy on his second wife.
If and when the time came that he ever had to kill her, he would do it, and this time he'd have a lot more money than he got the first time.
Even after these two suspicious deaths, the children steadfastly defended their father.
They say that he's innocent. Hope they're in counseling.
Tim Boskowski was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of his first wife, Elaine, and his second wife, Mary Ann. Boskowski insisted he was innocent.
The evidence does not support that charge.
Prosecutors in Greensboro believe Tim followed Elaine into the bathroom that night in 1990. A later interview with one of the children revealed there was an argument. Before Elaine got into the shower, Tim forced her over the edge of the tub and held her there for 4 or 5 minutes, preventing her from breathing. At some point in the struggle, Elaine vomited before she died. The lack of water in and around the bathtub and the bruises on Elaine's body told a tale of violence. In Tim's second marriage to Mary Ann, there were problems once more.
He just, killed the first one. Why not kill the second one? He got away with the first one. He figured he can get away with this one.
Pittsburgh prosecutors believe Tim and Mary Ann argued in the hot tub, possibly about her drinking or her interest in having children of her own. The evidence suggests Tim quickly overpowered Mary Ann, possibly covering her head with the beach towels to muffle her screams. Mary Ann fought for her life, splashing water onto the deck and scratching Tim's back. Tim knew from the first murder that strangulation victims sometimes vomit. This may be why he used the CPR mouthpiece in Mary Ann's case as protection while performing CPR when paramedics arrived.
All a charade, and all just a play. The acting. He was a terrible actor, by the way.
That.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, the jury found Tim Boskowski guilty in the first-degree murder of Elaine, wife number 1. He was sentenced to life in prison. In the murder trial of Mary Ann, wife number 2, it was the same verdict, guilty. But that jury sentenced Boskowski to death.
I think his sentence should be tie bricks around him, chain them to him rather, and throw him in the Allegheny River and let him see what it's like to drown. but you're not going to use that.
I was always against the death penalty. Having lived through this situation, I've changed my views.
Tim Boskowski continues to maintain his innocence. His children say their father didn't receive fair trials because jurors in both cases heard about both deaths.
Well, without forensics, of course, this case would have been missed. And if a case like this happens in a jurisdiction in which there is no competent forensic pathologist, it could well be missed. You know, the marks on the neck are very, very subtle, very minimal.
She left a message for all of us with the trauma about her body that proved that this wasn't an accidental drowning.
He basically told the same story twice with two wives, you know? And in both cases, neither story held water, you know? So he was basically just all wet.
A young nurse develops a fatal illness, and her doctors wonder if she was infected by one of her patients. Forensic scientists, genetic researchers, and even the police joined together to solve the mystery. And they discovered this was no accident. In 1994, Janice Trohan was a single mother of 2 young children working as a nurse in the small town of Lafayette, Louisiana. A few years back, she started to develop some unusual symptoms, and she did what most health professionals do, sought the advice of her doctor.
Started with a pain in my eyes, ocular pain, movement of my eyes. Did seek some medical attention for that, and was told it was probably my sinuses, not to worry too much about it.
Janice visited several doctors before she finally saw her gynecologist for a checkup.
And then lymph nodes started to appear, swollen lymph nodes.
Suspecting she had a virus, her gynecologist ordered a full battery of tests. When she got the results, Janice was both thrilled and devastated.
At this checkup, not only did she find out she was pregnant, but she found out that she was HIV positive.
There were several possible explanations for how Janice had been infected with HIV. Janice worked as a hospital nurse. She may have been infected from one of the AIDS patients there. Another possibility was that Janice became infected from a previous lover. Janice's primary care physician at the time, Dr. Richard Schmidt, told colleagues his theory as to how Janice became infected.
He said, Janice is a slut. She sleeps around, she's in the bars at night, she goes to bars during the day, she goes home with strange men, and she's most likely contracted the disease from sleeping around.
Knowing her unborn child could be infected with HIV as well, Janice decided to end her pregnancy. And she faced the realization of her own personal agony.
My prognosis is, I know it's uncertain. I know that HIV is a terminal disease and there is no cure.
All of Janice's lovers of the last 10 years were asked to undergo HIV testing. Surprisingly, none tested positive for HIV. But Janice had her own theory as to how she became infected. It was a theory so unbelievable and so fantastic, few believed her, including the Lafayette Police Department. A small-town nurse, Janet Trohan, learned she had been diagnosed HIV positive in January 1995. 5 months later, she walked into District Attorney Mike Harson's office and told an improbable story about her own doctor, Richard Schmidt.
She began relating a story to me how she had had this relationship with Dr. Schmidt for a number of years, and that she had recently found out that she had AIDS or HIV, and she felt that he was responsible for it.
While Harson was skeptical, he told Lafayette Police Detective Jim Kraft to check out her story.
Well, she said that SOB injected me.
The story was hard to believe.
He wasn't running some kind of fat farm or something. He was a real live doctor with credentials and a background.
Richard Schmidt was probably one of the best physicians and most respected physicians in this community as far as his medical capabilities. His patients adored him.
For her, she left hers, he never left his.
But Janice and Schmidt continued to see one another. In 1991, Janice became pregnant and gave birth to their son, Jeffrey. Schmidt paid child support and continued to promise he'd meet his wife, but he never did. Janice told police she tried to end the relationship many times, but said Schmidt made threats against her. Several times, he threatened to put sexually revealing pictures he had taken of her on the hospital bulletin board where she worked. Another time, he threatened to tell the dean of the nursing school that Janice had plagiarized some of her assignments.
She tried to start seeing other men, start dating other guys. The problem was that each time she attempted to establish a relationship outside of their relationship, Richard would intervene in that. He followed her on dates that she had with other men. He even threatened a couple of the guys that she had dated. One, he threatened to kill. Went to his home and threatened to kill him.
And Janice feared for her life.
Words to the effect, if you leave me, I'll fix you, I'll fix it, so that no man will want you.
Or she gave him an ultimatum. She told Richard, either leave your wife and marry me or we're through.
When Richard failed to respond, Janice ended their personal relationship and she stopped using him as her doctor. Schmidt had been treating her with vitamin B12 shots for her lethargy. According to Janice, something strange happened on the evening of August 4th. Janice was fast asleep when the phone rang between 10 and 11 o'clock. It was Dr. Schmidt, saying he was coming over right away. A few minutes later, he was standing over her with a syringe.
The injection was very painful, radiated down my arm. I never had an injection of that type or to cause that much pain in my life.
Unlike other visits, Janice said Dr. Schmidt didn't stay to talk.
He left quickly after the injection. He was nervous, rushed, just out of the ordinary.
Janice was convinced that that shot that Schmidt gave her was contaminated with HIV. But police weren't so sure.
My mindset was, I don't believe this girl. This is just her attempt to discredit this guy, to embarrass him, to get some bucks, to get some money out of him.
And even if Janice was right, how could anyone prove it? Schmidt gave her the injection.
Immediately, we look for the 1994 book, but we can't find it. It's missing.
In Schmidt's desk, police found the sexually revealing photos he had taken of Janice that he had threatened to distribute. But they still couldn't find his 1994 office records. They were about to leave when they discovered a locked storage room full of boxes. At the very bottom of a pile was a box marked 1982 records. In the very bottom of that box was a notebook.
And I thumbed through it real quickly, and it's only halfway full. Got, I don't know, 50, 60 pages in it, but only about 20 or 30 of them are full. And I look at the last date in the book, and wouldn't you know it, it's August 4th, 1994.
Next to nearly every patient's name who had given blood that day was a sticker with a tracking number on it for the lab. All except one, a patient named Don McClellan. Beside his name was a notation that said, "Lavender stopper for Dr. S." Police went to see Don McClellan, and they asked him a very important question.
Are you HIV positive? The guy stares at him and says, HIV positive? Hell, I've got full-blown AIDS.
And McClellan said he never called Dr. Schmidt to make an appointment on August 4th. He said Dr. Schmidt called him to come in for a blood test.
It was insidious. It was beyond diabolical. It's one of the strangest and cruelest crimes I've ever heard of.
But could forensic scientists match the strain of HIV in Janice Trahan to Dr. Schmidt's patient? Prosecutors wanted to know whether Dr. Richard Schmidt took HIV-infected blood from one of his patients and injected it into his former lover, Janice Trahan.
Would there be a way through traditional science or traditional DNA testing to compare those two persons and those two samples, or samples from those two people, to determine whether they are in fact the same virus?
They turned to genetic researcher Dr. Michael Metzger at Baylor College of Medicine in Texas, one of the world's most renowned centers of human genome studies. Dr. Metzger told them that DNA tests of a virus are not the same as comparing DNA from individuals. That's because viruses change or mutate once they entered the body. But Dr. Metzger was willing to conduct an experiment to see if the HIV in Janice's body was similar to Dr. Schmidt's HIV patient, Don McClellan.
The methods that we use are called phylogenetic methods. That invokes, it takes advantage of the virus mutability. As the virus mutates, it evolves in different individuals. We can use that evolution using mathematical models to actually trace back relationships between viruses if they exist.
Dr. Metzger looked at blood samples from 30 individuals infected with HIV in Lafayette, Louisiana, including the samples from Janice Trahan and Don McClellan. He discovered that 28 of those samples had mutated in ways vastly different from one another. But in 2 of the samples, the viruses were nearly identical and were therefore closely related. The samples were from Janice Trahan and Don McClellan.
When we looked at the viruses, the odds that we found were 1 in a million of excluding the patient being the source of Janice Trahan's virus.
That, for us, was corroboration of our theory that Schmidt had used the virus of one of his patients to use to infect Janice Trahan.
In July of 1996, Dr. Schmidt was charged with attempted second-degree murder. But prosecutors were faced with another scientific riddle.
When ultimately Janice was diagnosed, she was also diagnosed not only HIV positive, but with hepatitis C. The patient whose blood had been drawn on August 4th was HIV positive, but did not have hepatitis C.
When investigators looked again at Dr. Schmidt's medical records, they noticed one more patient listed with no lab sticker next to her name. That patient had blood drawn 2 days before Janice's nighttime injection, but her blood was never sent to the lab. That patient's medical record showed she had hepatitis C.
The doctor not only appears to have infected his lover with HIV, but combined it with hepatitis C from yet another patient to create this even more lethal cocktail that he injected her with that night.
Promise when Janice ended their relationship. He did it by injecting the HIV and hepatitis C tainted blood into Janice's arm, and did it on the same day he took the HIV sample, making sure it maintained its potency. Despite his medical degree, Dr. Schmidt never realized that forensic DNA testing could compare the mutations of the HIV in his patient Don McClellan and match them to the HIV in Janice.
To me, what he did was something that's really atrocious when you think about it. I mean, here's a man who took an oath to preserve people's lives and to do everything he could to preserve people's lives. And in this fashion, he basically did everything just the opposite.
On October 23, 1998, he was convicted of attempted second-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years hard labor.
Most people carry out these attacks with a gun or a knife or a club, but here was a guy who had to think about what he was going to do, how he was going to do it, what means was he going to use to effect her death. And it was just so diabolical and so evil.
Juries like to see, be able to see a smoking gun or the knife or the baseball bat or whatever it is that's used to commit the act. And in this case, we really didn't have it. We didn't have that tangible item. But the scientific evidence gave us that chance, because what it essentially boiled down to, it, unfortunately, is that these two individuals from whom these samples were drawn were our smoking guns.
Janice Trohan is remarried and lives with her 2 sons in the same house where she was infected that August night.
I just try to put things in the past and just keep moving forward. And my outlook on life, I think, is very good. I appreciate life more. You know, stop and look at the flowers and treasure each day that I do have with my family and my husband. It's much more meaningful.
This case made forensic history. It was the first time in the United States that 2 HIV cases have been linked using DNA testing in a criminal case.
The significance of the DNA testing is that we attempted to use something that had not been done before, and attempted to strike out in our jobs as prosecutors to find a way to prove the elements of a crime.
We use the most advanced tools for understanding the relationship between the DNA sequences from HIV, but they're pretty standard. The impact and the contribution was to bring this new methodology into the judicial system and to use it as a tool for investigation of alleged crimes.
Rain had washed the streets of Northern California all afternoon, leaving behind a city that looked strangely polished, as if every secret had been scrubbed from the pavement. It was just after 10:30 p.m. on October 18, 1987, when the first 911 call shattered that illusion. The dispatcher expected another report of a traffic collision or a neighborhood disturbance. Instead, a trembling voice whispered a sentence that would haunt investigators for decades. "There's a woman lying behind the old warehouse. I think she's dead." Within minutes, flashing patrol lights cut through the darkness. Officers crossed a narrow service road lined with abandoned freight buildings and overgrown weeds. The victim was found beside a rusted loading dock, partially hidden behind stacks of broken wooden pallets. There were no signs of robbery, no obvious weapon, no witnesses waiting to tell police what had happened, only silence. The woman was 28-year-old Emily Carson, a respected elementary school teacher known throughout the neighborhood for staying late after class to help struggling students. Friends describe her as careful, predictable, the kind of person who always phoned her parents every Sunday evening and never missed a family birthday. She had disappeared less than 3 hours earlier. Her car was still parked outside a grocery store several blocks away. The driver's door was locked. Her purse rested neatly on the passenger seat. Her wallet still contained cash. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared rushed. The crime scene challenged every assumption detectives normally relied upon. There were no tire marks fresh enough to identify a vehicle. Rain had erased most impressions in the mud. Nearby railroad tracks remained empty. The nearest businesses had already closed for the evening. If someone had watched the attack, they never came forward. Crime scene technicians worked through the night beneath portable floodlights, photographing every inch of wet concrete. They collected cigarette butts left months earlier by unknown visitors, rust flakes from the loading dock, small fibers trapped beneath broken boards, drops of water mixed with soil that offered little hope. Then one technician noticed something almost invisible. A dusty metal maintenance door leading into the warehouse had escaped the rain because of the building's roof overhang. Across its faded gray paint, barely visible beneath years of grime, sat a single fingerprint. Perfect. Not smeared. Not partial. A complete impression left by someone's right index finger. The print seemed strangely out of place. Investigators immediately assumed it belonged to a warehouse employee or maintenance worker. Still, protocol required it to be photographed and lifted. The fingerprint was carefully sealed into evidence. No one imagined it would spend nearly 40 years inside an archive before changing everything. The following morning, newspapers exploded with headlines. Beloved teacher found slain. Community shocked. California murder mystery baffles detectives. Parents gathered outside Emily's school carrying flowers. Students cried openly. Teachers struggled to explain tragedy to children too young to understand violence. The city demanded answers. Police promised quick arrests. Neither promise would survive the month. Detective Harold Benson led the investigation, a veteran homicide investigator with nearly 2 decades of experience. Benson believed every killer made at least one mistake. Somewhere inside the growing mountain of reports, interviews, and forensic evidence, he believed that mistake already existed. The challenge was finding it. Emily's final day appeared painfully ordinary. She taught morning classes, graded homework during lunch, attended a faculty meeting, stopped at a grocery store shortly after sunset. Security cameras were almost non-existent in 1987. The supermarket had none outside. Cashiers remember seeing her smiling while purchasing milk, bread, coffee, and apples. Nothing unusual. No one following her. No arguments. No visible fear. One employee vaguely recalled noticing a dark-colored sedan parked across the street for nearly an hour, but he couldn't describe the driver. It became the investigation's first ghost. Detectives interviewed hundreds of residents. former boyfriends, co-workers, neighbors, parents, construction workers, delivery drivers, everyone who had crossed Emily's path during the previous month. Most interviews produced sympathy. Some produced rumors. One neighbor insisted hearing tires squeal around 10 o'clock. Another believed seeing a tall man, wearing a baseball cap, walking near the warehouse district. Neither statement could be verified. Meanwhile, forensic reports continued arriving. No usable DNA. Very little biological evidence. No murder weapon. Rain had quietly destroyed whatever story the ground might have told. Attention returned repeatedly to the fingerprint. Technicians searched local databases. Nothing. State records. Nothing. Federal files. Nothing. It belonged to someone who had apparently never been arrested, or someone whose records had never been digitized. Weeks turned into months. Months became years. Evidence boxes multiplied. Leads evaporated. The investigation slowly transformed into something detectives feared more than failure. It became a cold case. Emily's parents refused to move from the family home. Every birthday, they placed fresh flowers beside her photograph. Every Christmas, they left one empty chair untouched. Neighbors gradually stopped discussing the murder. New families moved into the area without knowing its history. The warehouse eventually closed permanently. Its windows shattered. Graffiti covered its walls. Children dared one another to sneak inside the abandoned building after dark, unaware that detectives had once searched every corner looking for a killer. Detective Benson retired in 1998. Before leaving the department, he carried Emily's file into the property room himself. He paused for several seconds before placing it onto a steel shelf already crowded with forgotten investigations. "I hope somebody smarter than me finishes this one," he quietly said. The boxes disappeared into darkness. Years passed. Technology changed. DNA science advanced faster than anyone imagined. Fingerprints once examined through magnifying glasses were now scanned using sophisticated digital imaging systems capable of comparing millions of records within minutes. Cold case units began reopening investigations previously considered impossible. Emily Carson's file remained untouched. Not because investigators had forgotten, because there simply wasn't enough evidence to justify reopening it. At least, that was the official explanation. Unofficially, many detectives believed the killer had died long ago. The city itself transformed during the following decades. New apartment buildings replaced abandoned factories. Coffee shops occupied former warehouses. The loading dock where Emily had been discovered was demolished during a redevelopment project. Concrete covered the ground forever. Physical memories disappeared. Only archived photographs remained. Then, almost 37 years after the murder, a young evidence specialist named Rachel Kim received an assignment nobody wanted. Digitize unsolved homicide evidence scheduled for long-term preservation. Thousands of files. Thousands of photographs. Thousands of forgotten fingerprints. Most represented investigations with little remaining hope. Rachel approached the work with relentless patience. She believed every old case deserved modern technology, even if success seemed unlikely. Late one evening, she opened a faded evidence envelope marked simply, Carson, Emily, October 1987. Inside rested the fingerprint lifted from the warehouse maintenance door. The original acetate sheet had yellowed with age. Tiny handwritten initials identified the crime scene technician who collected it decades earlier. Rachel carefully scanned the print using equipment unavailable in the 1980s. The software enhanced ridge details invisible to the naked eye. For the first time since Ronald Reagan occupied the White House, the fingerprint existed as a high-resolution digital image. She submitted it through expanded state and federal comparison systems. Normally, such searches return nothing. Thousands of unmatched prints remained unmatched forever. Rachel clicked submit. The computer began processing. Minutes passed. No result. She continued organizing other evidence while the system searched silently in the background. Then an alert appeared. Possible match detected. She frowned. False positives happened regularly. The software displayed a confidence score. higher than expected. Rachel requested manual verification. 2 fingerprint examiners independently reviewed ridge endings, bifurcations, pore structure, and spatial alignment. One by one, every identifying point matched. The fingerprint belonged to a man no investigator had ever seriously considered. Not a violent criminal. Not a known gang member. Not a drifter. Not even someone mentioned prominently in the original reports. His name appeared only once, buried inside an interview transcript almost forgotten by history. A quiet local accountant, married, father of 2 young children in 1987, a volunteer youth baseball coach, respected by neighbors, never arrested, never publicly connected to violent crime. Back then, detectives dismissed him within minutes because he claimed he had never been near the abandoned warehouse. No evidence contradicted him. Until now, one forgotten fingerprint had silently waited nearly 4 decades to expose a statement that could no longer be true. And for the first time since that rainy October night, investigators realized they might not be hunting a mysterious stranger after all. They might have been overlooking someone who had hidden in plain sight from the very beginning. By sunrise, the atmosphere inside the California Department of Justice Cold Case Unit had changed completely. Conversations became shorter. Coffee cups sat untouched. Computer screens glowed with archive reports that had not been opened in decades. A murder everyone believed would remain unsolved had suddenly become active again. No announcement reached the public. No press conference followed. Only a handful of investigators knew that a single fingerprint had rewritten nearly 40 years of assumptions. The name on the report was Daniel Mercer, 59 years old in 2024, retired certified public accountant, married for 36 years, no criminal history, no documented acts of violence, no financial fraud, no restraining orders, nothing. His neighbors described him with almost identical words. Quiet, reliable, polite, invisible. He attended church every Sunday. He volunteered during food drives. He coached Little League Baseball throughout the 1990s. The image did not fit, not even slightly. Detective Laura Mitchell, assigned to lead the reopened investigation, refused to accept appearances as evidence. She had spent nearly 15 years working homicide. She knew that some of the most brutal offenders had looked completely ordinary. The fingerprint tells us one thing, she reminded her team. He touched that warehouse door. What it doesn't tell us is why. The original case files were spread across a conference table nearly 20 feet long. Every photograph, every witness statement, every laboratory report, thousands of pages. The investigators began reading everything again, not searching for new evidence, searching for old evidence they had once ignored. Patterns slowly emerged. Daniel Mercer had not been a random name. In fact, he had crossed paths with Emily Carson more than anyone had realized. In 1987, Mercer worked for a regional accounting firm located only 6 blocks from Emily's elementary school. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he parked in the same public lot where Emily often left her car before walking to nearby shops. That fact meant little on its own. California cities are crowded. People unknowingly pass each other every day. But another report changed the picture. An employee from the grocery store had told detectives she vaguely remembered seeing a man wearing a gray business suit speaking with Emily in the parking lot shortly before she disappeared. The statement received almost no attention in 1987. The witness admitted she could not identify the man. She only remembered the suit because everyone else shopping that evening wore casual clothes. Mercer almost always wore gray suits to work. Still, thousands of men wore gray suits. It proved nothing. Another file surfaced. Detectives had interviewed Mercer only 5 days after murder because his office happened to overlook part of the warehouse district. The interview lasted just 18 minutes. Mercer calmly explained he had worked late that evening preparing tax documents. He denied seeing Emily, denied visiting the warehouse, denied leaving the office before 9:30. Investigators accepted the explanation almost immediately. No one checked further. Why would they? He had no known connection to the victim, no criminal record, no motive, no reason to lie, except now. The fingerprints suggested otherwise. Mitchell ordered every surviving record connected to Mercer in October 1987. Payroll logs, parking permits, employment schedules, telephone records, bank transactions. The process took weeks. Many documents had already been destroyed under routine retention policies. Others existed only on aging microfilm. Retired clerks helped locate forgotten boxes stored inside county archives. Slowly, missing pieces returned. One discovery immediately caught everyone's attention. Mercer's office security log showed something unexpected. Employees signed out whenever they left after hours. Daniel Mercer signed out at 8:41 p.m., not 9:30, not even close. His office stood nearly 15 minutes from a grocery store where Emily had last been seen. The timeline suddenly became possible, very possible. But another page complicated everything. Mercer had returned to the building at 9:12 p.m. Why leave? Why return? The original investigators never asked. The log had been overlooked because detectives relied mainly on Mercer's verbal interview rather than company records. It was a small mistake, the kind easily made during a high-profile investigation, the kind that sometimes buried the truth. Mitchell leaned back in her chair. If he lied about his timeline, she stopped. Nobody finished the sentence, because everyone already knew. People lie for many reasons: embarrassment, affairs, financial problems, personal secrets. Lying alone never proves murder. Yet experienced detectives understood something equally important. Honest witnesses rarely invent unnecessary timelines. The investigation widened. Mercer's former co-workers were located across 4 different states. Some had retired. Others barely remembered 1987. Most described Mercer exactly as expected: professional, reserved, methodical. One retired receptionist paused unexpectedly during her interview. I always thought he liked Emily. Mitchell looked up. What do you mean? He mentioned her once or twice. How? He said she seemed kind. Did they know each other? I don't know. Did you ever see them together? The woman hesitated. Maybe once. When? I can't remember exactly. But I remember thinking it was odd because Daniel wasn't social. Where? I think outside the grocery store. Memory fades over decades. Investigators treated the statement cautiously. Human recollection changes. Faces blur. Dates disappear. Still, it aligned with the old grocery employee's account. 2 separate witnesses. Neither had known the other. Both suggested Mercer may have spoken with Emily before her death. Meanwhile, forensic specialists reopened every preserved evidence package. Advances in DNA recovery had transformed impossible samples into potential leads. They examined Emily's clothing again. Tiny fibers, microscopic debris, hair fragments, everything. Most samples had degraded beyond usefulness. Time had not been kind. But one laboratory technician noticed several blue synthetic fibers trapped inside the sleeve of Emily's jacket. The fibers had never been identified. In 1987, forensic databases capable of comparing textile manufacturing patterns simply did not exist. Now they did. Weeks later, the laboratory issued its report. The fibers were consistent with commercial automotive carpeting commonly installed inside several mid-size American sedans manufactured during the mid-1980s. Consistent, not unique. Thousands of vehicles matched. It narrowed possibilities. Nothing more. Investigators learned Mercer owned a dark blue 1985 sedan. Records showed he sold the vehicle in 1991. The car no longer existed. Scrapped years earlier. Another possible lead vanished. Mitchell refused to become discouraged. Cold cases rarely collapse because of one missing piece. They survived through persistence. Piece by piece. Interview by interview, record by record. She visited the abandoned warehouse site. Nothing remained except modern office buildings. Employees walked past carrying laptops and coffee cups, unaware that beneath the concrete parking lot lay the location where one of California's most haunting murders had unfolded. Mitchell stood silently for several minutes. She imagined the rain, the flashing patrol lights, the frightened officers, the fingerprint waiting unnoticed on that maintenance door. Sometimes crime scenes disappear. Truth does not. Back at headquarters, analysts reconstructed Mercer's movements using historical maps, archived traffic patterns, and surviving business records. If he left work at 8:41, he had enough time to reach the grocery store, enough time to encounter Emily, enough time to drive toward the warehouse district, enough time to return before signing back into his office. The schedule fit, almost too perfectly. Yet one enormous question remained unanswered. Why? Emily had no known enemies, no financial disputes, no romantic involvement with Mercer, no documented connection whatsoever. Without motive, prosecutors would hesitate. Without stronger evidence, juries would question everything. Mitchell instructed investigators to look beyond police records. Sometimes motives never appear in official files. Sometimes they hide inside ordinary lives. Old neighborhood newsletters, school fundraising events, church bulletins, community newspapers, boxes donated to local historical societies. The search became almost archaeological. Then another coincidence surfaced. Or perhaps not a coincidence. Emily had volunteered every Wednesday evening at a literacy program held inside the community center. Attendance sheets survived. So did volunteer records. One name appeared several times among financial advisors, providing free tax assistance to low-income families. Daniel Mercer. The dates overlapped. They had occupied the same building repeatedly during the summer of 1987. Not strangers. Not exactly. Whether they actually interacted remained unknown, but the assumption that they had never met was no longer supported. Mitchell stared at the attendance sheet for a long time. The investigation that once revolved around a mysterious attacker now pointed toward two ordinary people whose lives may have quietly crossed paths months before the murder. Outside headquarters, reporters remained unaware. The case stayed sealed. Investigators wanted facts before headlines. Because fingerprints can reveal presence, they cannot reveal intent. And intent was becoming the most dangerous mystery of all. The deeper investigators dug into the lives of Emily Carson and Daniel Mercer, the more unsettling the case became, not because they discovered dramatic confrontations or obvious motives, but because they discovered almost nothing. Two ordinary lives had existed within the same city, crossed the same streets, visited the same grocery store, volunteered in the same community center, and yet left behind almost no record of ever truly knowing each other. For a detective, that kind of silence was often more disturbing than conflict. Mitchell ordered every surviving document from the literacy program to be recovered: attendance sheets, volunteer applications, reimbursement forms, donation receipts, photographs from fundraising events. Anything that could place Emily and Mercer in the same room. Most of the files had been discarded years earlier. A few boxes, forgotten in the basement of the old community center before it was renovated, had survived. Dust covered everything. Inside, one box sat dozens of faded photographs, birthday celebrations, holiday charity drives, volunteer appreciation dinners. Investigators scanned every face, hour after hour, frame after frame. Then one photograph stopped everyone. Taken in August 1987, during a fundraising picnic, Emily stood beside several volunteers, smiling toward the camera. Only a few feet behind her stood Daniel Mercer. He wasn't looking at the photographer. He was looking at Emily. The image alone proved nothing. People glance in different directions all the time. Still, it was the first documented evidence placing both of them together months before the murder. The photograph was enlarged, every face examined, every detail cataloged. A detective noticed something else. Mercer's wife was not present. Neither were his children. Yet volunteer records showed he had attended that event alone. Mitchell tracked down the retired event coordinator. At 83 years old, her memory came and went in fragments. She studied the photograph for nearly a minute before speaking. "I remember Emily." "What about him?" Mitchell asked, pointing toward Mercer. The woman squinted. "He was always quiet." "Did they talk?" "I think everyone talked that day." "Anything unusual?" Another long pause. "He asked me once if Emily was seeing anyone." The room fell silent. "Are you certain?" "I can't swear to it. It was a long time ago. But I remember telling him it wasn't my business." It wasn't enough to establish obsession. It wasn't enough to establish motive. But it was another piece. One more thread connecting two lives once believed unrelated. Investigators widened their search. Emily's closest friends were interviewed again. Several had already passed away. Others struggled to remember details from nearly 4 decades earlier. One former co-worker recalled something curious. Emily had mentioned that an unfamiliar man occasionally appeared outside the school after classes ended. He never spoke to her? "I don't know." "Did she describe him?" "Just a man in office clothes." "Did she seem frightened?" "Not frightened, just uncomfortable." No report had ever been filed. No complaint. No police contact. Back then it seemed too insignificant. Now it sounded different. Mitchell resisted drawing conclusions. Eyewitness memory is fragile, especially after 37 years. She wanted evidence, not assumptions. The task force subpoenaed every surviving employment record from Mercer's accounting firm. Most files were ordinary: performance reviews, salary increases, vacation requests. Then investigators found something unexpected. On October 19, 1987, the morning after Emily's body was discovered, Mercer called in sick. That alone wasn't suspicious. Thousands of innocent people call in sick every day. But according to payroll records, it was the first sick day he had taken in over 3 years. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. The original investigators never knew. The payroll records had remained buried inside company archives until now. Mitchell requested interviews with Mercer's surviving co-workers once again. One retired accountant remembered something that had seemed meaningless at the time. Daniel looked exhausted. "When?" "The Monday after the murder." "Anything else?" He kept reading the newspaper, over and over. "Did he mention the case?" He asked whether police had found any suspects. "Was that unusual?" "I guess not." Everyone was talking about it. Another witness remembered Mercer abruptly volunteering to organize old financial storage rooms during the following weekend. He spent nearly 10 hours alone inside company archives. Nobody knew why. Those storage rooms had long since been emptied. Nothing remained to examine. Another opportunity lost. Meanwhile, forensic specialists returned to the fingerprint itself. Using modern enhancement techniques, they reanalyzed pressure distribution across the ridges. The results surprised them. The print had not been left casually. It showed signs of significant downward pressure, as though someone had pushed firmly against a metal door, perhaps opening it, perhaps steadying themselves, perhaps forcing it shut. There was no way to know, but the fingerprint no longer looked like an accidental touch. It looked deliberate. Mitchell visited Mercer under the pretense of reviewing historical witnesses. No arrest warrant, no accusation, just conversation. His home appeared immaculate. Freshly trimmed hedges, polished windows, a quiet suburban street where nothing ever seemed to happen. Mercer answered the door, wearing a light blue sweater. His hair had turned completely white. His posture remained straight, his expression calm. "I've spoken with police before," he said politely. "Many years ago." "We're reviewing older files," Mitchell replied. "It helps to ask everyone again." He invited them inside. Family photographs lined the shelves. Graduations, vacations, Christmas mornings, the life of an ordinary man. Mitchell asked about 1987. Mercer smiled faintly. That was a lifetime ago. Do you remember Emily Carson? The teacher? Yes. I remember hearing about the murder. Did you know her? I don't think so. You volunteered at the literacy program. I've volunteered with many people. I can't remember everyone. What about the community picnic? I vaguely remember attending. Did you speak with her? I honestly don't know. Mitchell watched every movement, every pause. Mercer never appeared nervous, never defensive. He answered slowly, carefully, almost too carefully. Then came the question, have you ever visited the old warehouse district? He shook his head immediately. No. Never. Mitchell held his gaze. Our records suggest you denied that in 1987 as well. Because it was true. What if we found evidence placing you there? Mercer's expression remained unchanged. I couldn't explain evidence that doesn't exist. The interview ended politely. No confrontation. No confession. No mistake. Driving back to headquarters, Mitchell replayed every second in her mind. Experienced detectives often relied on instinct. Hers told her Mercer had prepared for that conversation long before it happened, almost as though he had expected it someday. Weeks later, investigators received another report. A forensic genealogist reviewing archived evidence had extracted an extremely small DNA profile from underneath one of Emily's fingernails. The sample was degraded, incomplete, not suitable for direct identification, but enough to determine one important fact. The contributor was male. The original laboratory in 1987 had never detected it. Technology simply wasn't advanced enough. Hope surged through the task force. Could it belong to Mercer? Scientists compared the degraded profile against a voluntary DNA sample obtained after Mercer agreed to cooperate. The laboratory worked for nearly a month. Finally, the results arrived. Inconclusive. The sample was too damaged. It could neither identify Mercer nor eliminate him. Another dead end. Frustration spread across the investigation. The fingerprint remained the strongest evidence. Strong enough to reopen the case, not yet strong enough to explain the murder. Mitchell stood before the evidence board late one evening. Emily's smiling school portrait occupied the center. Around hung photographs, timelines, maps, witness interviews, forensic reports, an enlarged fingerprint that had awakened the case after 37 years. Every thread pointed toward Daniel Mercer. Every unanswered question pointed somewhere else. Then an analyst walked quietly into the room, carrying a thin folder. I think we found something. Mitchell looked up. What is it? A bank statement. So? It wasn't Daniel's. Whose was it? Emily's. The analyst opened the folder. 3 days before she died. Mitchell leaned forward. She withdrew $5,000 in cash. The room became silent. $5,000. In 1987, a remarkable amount of money for an elementary school teacher. The withdrawal had never appeared in the original investigation. No detective had noticed it. No report explained where the money went. No envelope containing cash was found in Emily's car. None was found in her apartment. None was found at the crime scene. The money had simply vanished. And suddenly, investigators were no longer chasing only a fingerprint. They were chasing 40-year-old money that had disappeared the same weekend a young teacher lost her life. The discovery of the missing money changed the investigation overnight. For nearly 4 decades, detectives had treated Emily Carson's murder as an apparently motiveless act of violence. Now, forgotten financial records suggested another possibility. Whether the cash had anything to do with her death remained unknown, but investigators could no longer ignore it. $5,000. In 1987, it represented nearly 4 months of Emily's salary. No teacher withdrew that amount without a reason. Mitchell assembled the task force before sunrise. Every assignment changed. Half the team continued examining Daniel Mercer. The other half chased the money. Where had it gone? Why had Emily withdrawn it? Who knew she had it? Old banking procedures made tracing cash nearly impossible. Electronic records barely existed. Security cameras inside banks recorded over themselves within days. No video survived. The teller who processed a withdrawal had died years earlier. The branch manager had retired to Arizona and remembered nothing unusual about that week. Still, paper records remained. Emily withdrew the money on Thursday afternoon. She signed the withdrawal slip herself. The signature matched perfectly. No forgery. No coercion. She had willingly taken the cash. 3 days later, she was dead. Investigators searched every surviving document from Emily's apartment. Old utility bills, personal calendars, receipts, greeting cards, telephone notebooks. One page inside a small address book caught Mitchell's attention. Written in blue ink was a single reminder. Sunday, 8:30, don't forget the envelope. Nothing else. No name. No address. No explanation. The page had been photographed in 1987. Detectives back then assumed it referred to school paperwork. Nobody followed up. Now it looked different. Very different. The envelope. Could it have contained the cash? If so, who was supposed to receive it? Friends described Emily as financially responsible. She had no gambling debts, no known loans, no expensive habits. Her checking account remained stable for years. The withdrawal stood alone, an isolated event. Mitchell requested Emily's telephone records again. The originals were incomplete, but archive billing summary survived. Most calls were exactly what investigators expected. Parents, co-workers, her mother, the school office. Then one unfamiliar number appeared repeatedly during the week before the murder. 6 calls, each lasting less than 3 minutes. The number belonged to a public payphone, located less than 2 blocks from Daniel Mercer's office. Mitchell stared at the report. Payphones could not identify callers. Anyone could have used it. Still, the coincidence was impossible to ignore. Investigators searched the original interview transcripts once more. Mercer had never mentioned using public telephones. Nobody had asked. Back in 1987, the payphone meant nothing. Today it represented another unanswered question. The task force returned to the community center. Most of the building had been renovated years earlier. Only the basement storage rooms remained untouched. Maintenance workers unlocked old filing cabinets that had not been opened in decades. Inside one cabinet rested volunteer registration cards, names, addresses, emergency contacts. Emily's card was there. So was Mercer's. Mitchell compared them side by side. Her eyes stopped on one line. Emergency contact. Emily listed her older sister. Mercer listed his wife. Ordinary. But below that, volunteer assignment preference. Emily requested literacy tutoring. Mercer requested financial counseling. Different programs. Different schedules. Except for 1 week in September. Because of the staffing shortage, volunteers had been temporarily reassigned. Records placed Emily and Mercer in the same classroom for nearly 3 hours. The assignment lasted 1 evening. No further detail survived. Mitchell quietly folded the paper. The distance between victim and suspect kept shrinking, not dramatically, just enough. Always enough. Another interview produced an even stranger memory. A retired janitor remembered Locken Community Center one night when he saw Emily arguing softly with a man near the parking lot. He couldn't identify the man. He only remembered one sentence. Emily had said, "No, please don't keep asking." At the time, the janitor assumed it was a disagreement between friends. He drove home, forgot about it. 37 years later, that forgotten sentence echoed through the investigation. Who had been asking? What did they want? No answer existed. Mitchell requested enhanced analysis of the picnic photograph, modern software estimated body positions, and eye direction. Experts concluded Mercer was almost certainly looking toward Emily when the picture was taken. Again, interesting, not incriminating. The investigation continued inch by inch. Then another forgotten witness surfaced. A former gas station attendant, 19 years old in 1987, now nearly 60. He contacted police after seeing a television report announcing the case had been reopened. "I don't know if it matters," he told detectives. "Tell us anyway." "I remember a woman crying. When?" "The night before they found the body." "Where?" "Outside my station." "Did you recognize her?" "No. But after seeing her picture on TV the next day." He stopped. "I think it was Emily." Mitchell leaned forward. "What happened?" "She was standing beside a blue sedan." "Anyone else?" "A man." "Can you describe him?" "It was dark. He wore a business jacket." "What were they doing?" "They looked like they were arguing." "Did you hear anything?" "No. I was helping another customer. When I looked back, they were gone." The station sat less than a mile from the warehouse. Investigators checked property records. The business had been demolished in the late 1990s. No surveillance footage existed. No receipts. Nothing. Only memory. Fragile. Incomplete. Yet it matched the emerging pattern. Business clothes. A blue sedan. An argument. Mitchell refused to let confirmation bias take control. Every cold case carried enormous danger. Once investigators focused on one suspect. Every coincidence seemed meaningful. She instructed analysts to search for alternative explanations. Could someone else have owned a similar car? Yes. Could another volunteer have worked nearby? Yes. Could the fingerprint have been left weeks before the murder? Possibly. Every possibility had to be tested. Science first. Theory second. Then came another forensic review. Investigators re-examined Emily's purse. The contents had been preserved exactly as found. Wallet. Driver's license. Lipstick. School keys. Receipts. A folded grocery list. Nothing unusual. Until a technician removed the paper lining inside one compartment. Hidden beneath it lay a tiny scrap of notebook paper overlooked in 1987. It measured less than 2 inches wide. Only half the writing remained. "That meat alone. No police." The beginning had torn away. The end was missing. No signature. No date. No fingerprint. Mitchell felt the investigation shift again. If Emily had received the note, someone wanted secrecy. Someone feared law enforcement. The missing cash. The envelope. The mysterious note. The argument. The fingerprint. Separately, none proved murder. Together, they painted the outline of a meeting that had gone terribly wrong. Still, one question remained larger than all the others. Why had Daniel Mercer lied about never visiting the warehouse? Mitchell decided it was time to confront him again. This interview would be different. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his home. No television cameras. No dramatic arrest. Just quiet police vehicles arriving before dawn. Mercer answered the door, looking surprised but composed. "We have a warrant," Mitchell said. He nodded once. "I understand." Investigators searched every room. Family photo albums. Financial records. Old filing cabinets. Boxes stored in the attic. Nothing suggested violence. Nothing linked him directly to Emily. Then an officer opened a cardboard box filled with documents from the 1980s. Tax returns. Insurance forms. Vehicle registrations. And beneath them, a small leather-bound appointment planner dated 1987. Mitchell carefully turned each page. Meetings. Client names. Business lunches. Ordinary entries. Until October 18th. The page had been torn out, not damaged, not loose. Removed cleanly. Every other day remained intact. Only the page covering the night Emily died was missing. Mitchell slowly looked up. Across the room, Daniel Mercer stood silently watching. For the first time since the investigation reopened, his calm expression began to crack. For nearly a minute, no one in the room spoke. The torn page lay between Detective Laura Mitchell and Daniel Mercer like a silent accusation. It was only a missing sheet from an old planner. By itself, it proved absolutely nothing. People removed pages for countless innocent reasons. Shopping lists, telephone numbers, personal reminders. Yet investigators had searched thousands of planners over the years. Rarely did a single missing page coincide precisely with the night of an unsolved homicide. Mitchell closed the planner carefully. "When did you remove this page?" Mercer looked at it without touching it. "I don't remember." "Was it before or after October 18th? "I honestly couldn't tell you." "Why remove only that page?" "I don't know if I did." "You don't remember tearing it out?" He shook his head. It was almost 40 years ago. His answer was reasonable, frustratingly reasonable. The search continued. Investigators photographed every document before returning them to evidence bags. Inside another storage box, they found several check registers, old insurance paperwork, and maintenance receipts for Mercer's 1985 sedan. Nothing unusual. Then an evidence technician paused. One receipt came from a car detailing business. The date immediately caught everyone's attention. October 20th, 1987, 2 days after Emily's murder. The invoice described a complete interior shampoo, upholstery cleaning, and odor removal treatment. Mitchell frowned. How often did he detail the car? Analysts searched the remaining records. Only once. The vehicle had been washed regularly, but a full interior cleaning appeared nowhere else in 4 years of receipts. Again, it could be innocent. Spilled coffee, a sick child, flood damage, anything. Still, detectives added it to the growing timeline. Mercer left work early. Emily disappeared. Mercer called in sick the following morning. 2 days later, he paid for an unusually thorough cleaning of his car. No single fact established guilt. Together, they demanded explanation. Mitchell contacted the detailing company. The business had changed ownership twice. Old paper records survived only because a retired owner had stored them in his garage instead of destroying them. He remembered nothing about Mercer, but one handwritten notation on the invoice stood out. Customer requested immediate service. Waiting on site. Apparently, Mercer had insisted the cleaning be performed as soon as the shop opened. Why the urgency? No one knew. The team returned to forensic evidence. Although the sedan had been scrapped decades earlier, investigators wondered whether the cleaning chemicals used in 1987 match fibers recovered from Emily's jacket. Laboratory experts concluded there was no reliable way to make such comparison after so many years. Another promising path ended. Mitchell refused to slow down. She believed the investigation had reached a critical point. Somewhere in a mountain of forgotten records was the missing link, not a dramatic confession, not a surprise eyewitness. Something quieter, something overlooked. She ordered analysts to reconstruct Mercer's life week by week during the autumn of 1987. Every appointment, every bank transaction, every fuel purchase, every phone call that could still be documented. The picture that emerged surprised everyone. Mercer had withdrawn $5,000 in cash from his own bank account, one day before Emily withdrew the exact same amount from hers. The room fell silent. The coincidence was astonishing. 2 people, no publicly known relationship, each withdrawing exactly $5,000, within 24 hours of one another. Mitchell immediately cautioned the team. Coincidences happen, but we don't ignore them. The banks confirmed both withdrawals. Neither record explained the purpose. Neither customer deposited similar amounts afterward. Whatever happened to the money? It disappeared. Investigators developed multiple theories. Perhaps Emily planned to buy a car. Perhaps Mercer intended to make an investment. Perhaps the amounts had nothing to do with one another. Without evidence, every theory remained speculation. Then another overlooked document surfaced. Emily's sister had given detectives a small box of personal papers in 1987. Most had already been examined. One sealed envelope had not. It contained birthday cards and handwritten notes from friends. Among them sat a folded piece of stationery with no signature. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Only 3 sentences appeared. I know this is difficult. Please trust me. Everything will be over after Sunday. No date. No name. The handwriting had never been compared against anyone. Modern forensic document examiners began their analysis immediately. Meanwhile, detectives revisited Mercer. This time, they showed him copies of the withdrawal records. He studied them quietly. Yes, he said. I withdrew money. What for? I don't remember. $5,000? I handle finances. Cash withdrawals weren't unusual. They were for you. He remained silent. Mitchell slid another document across the table. Emily's withdrawal receipt. His eyes rested on it slightly longer than expected. Did you know she withdrew the same amount? No. Can you explain the coincidence? No. It could simply be coincidence. It could... Again, his answer was technically correct. The interview continued for another hour. Mercer never raised his voice, never became angry, never demanded a lawyer, yet every answer seemed measured, carefully limited, as though he had spent years deciding exactly how much to reveal. Back at headquarters, handwriting experts completed their preliminary review. The unsigned note could not be conclusively linked to Mercer. However, several letter formations resembled entries inside his 1987 appointment planner. Not enough for courtroom identification. Enough to justify deeper examination. Another small thread. Another unanswered question. Mitchell spent that evening rereading Emily's journal. Most entries described ordinary life. Lesson plans. Family dinners. Weekend errands. Then, roughly 2 weeks before the murder, one sentence caught her attention. Some people refused to hear the word no. Nothing else explained it. No names. No context. Just one sentence. Mitchell underlined it. If Emily had been referring to Mercer, it suggested unwanted attention. If she had been referring to someone else, the entire investigation could still be heading in the wrong direction. She refused to make assumptions. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired newspaper photographer contacted police after seeing media coverage of the reopened case. I covered the murder scene, he explained. I kept copies of everything. The department already possessed official crime scene photographs. But freelance photographers often captured images from different angles before police secured the perimeter. Mitchell drove to meet him personally. Boxes of negatives filled his garage. Thousands of forgotten photographs. The photographer carefully sorted through them until he found the envelope marked October 1987. The images were developed using modern scanning equipment. Most revealed nothing new. Police cars. Yellow tape. Crowds gathering behind barricades. Then one frame stopped everyone. Taken from across the street. Hours before sunrise. A dark blue sedan appeared parked nearly 100 yards from the warehouse. Too distant to identify the license plate. Too blurry to identify the driver. But one detail remained surprisingly clear. The rear passenger side hubcap was missing. Vehicle registration records showed Mercer's sedan had been reported with. Got a missing rear passenger side hubcap. Mitchell stared at the enlarged image. The laboratory confirmed only one thing. The photograph was authentic. Whether the vehicle actually belonged to Mercer could never be stated with certainty. It was another coincidence. Another possibility. Another shadow, refusing to disappear. Late that night, Mitchell returned alone to the evidence room. She stood before Emily's photograph once again. The investigation no longer looked impossible. It looked incomplete. A fingerprint, 2 identical cash withdrawals, a missing planner page, a mysterious note, an unusual car cleaning, an old photograph. Each clue seemed to point toward the same man, yet none answered the question that mattered most. Why? Then her phone rang. It was a forensic accountant reviewing Mercer's archived financial records. His voice sounded unusually tense. I think we found something bigger. What is it? There was another account. What kind of account? A private investment account. So, it wasn't reported anywhere during the original investigation. Mitchell's heartbeat quickened. How much money? The accountant took a breath. The balance suddenly increased. He paused. By almost $5,000. And you know when? Mitchell already feared the answer. The accountant quietly replied. 3 days after Emily Carson was murdered. The room went completely silent after the accountant finished speaking. 3 days after Emily Carson was murdered, Daniel Mercer's private investment account increased by almost exactly $5,000. The same amount Emily had withdrawn before her death. The same amount Mercer had withdrawn shortly before the murder. A number that had appeared twice in the investigation had now appeared a third time, $5,000. For 37 years, it had been hiding inside separate records, bank statements, withdrawal slips, financial documents, 3 unrelated pieces of paper that suddenly formed a disturbing pattern. But investigators knew better than anyone. Patterns could deceive. A coincidence could look like a confession if examined the wrong way. Mitchell demanded every detail. When was the deposit made? October 21st, 1987. Source: unknown. Cash? Yes. Can you identify the person who deposited it? No. Was Mercer the only account holder? Yes. The account existed under Mercer's name alone. The deposit had been made at a branch nearly 30 miles away from his workplace. No camera footage survived. No teller remembered. No receipt remained. Another door had opened. Another door had closed. Mitchell returned to headquarters before dawn. The evidence board had transformed from a collection of disconnected mysteries into something far more dangerous. A possible financial motive. A possible hidden relationship. A possible attempt to conceal the truth. But prosecutors would not build a murder case on the word possible. They needed proof. The investigation turned toward Emily's final week. What had she been doing? Who had she spoken with? Where had she gone? Every hour mattered. Detectives rebuilt her movements. Monday, normal. Tuesday, normal. Wednesday, a late meeting at school. Thursday, bank withdrawal. Friday, volunteer program. Saturday, several unanswered hours. Sunday evening, gone. The missing pieces were concentrated in one small window. Saturday night, the night before her death. Investigators searched Emily's old phone records again. One call stood out, a pay phone near Mercer's office. The call lasted only 47 seconds. The time, 6:18 p.m., Saturday, the night before the murder. Who called whom? Impossible to know, but the location was becoming impossible to ignore. Mitchell requested a search of Mercer's archived telephone records. Most had been destroyed. One document survived, a personal notebook recovered during the home search. Mercer had written down phone numbers manually. Several were business contacts. Several belonged to friends. One number appeared without a name. The same payphone. The entry had been written 3 days before Emily's death. No explanation. No notes. Just a number. The investigators felt the weight of the discovery. Mercer knew the phone. He had recorded it. He had some reason to keep it. But what reason? The team brought Mercer back for another interview. This time, the atmosphere was different. The polite conversation was gone. The questions were direct. Why did you write down this number? Mercer looked at the paper. His face remained calm. I don't remember. You don't remember a phone number? Not after 40 years. Did you call this pay phone? I don't know. Did Emily Carson call you from this number? A pause. Small. Almost invisible. But everyone noticed. I don't know. Mitchell leaned forward. Daniel, a fingerprint placed you at the warehouse. I told you I don't know how. Your car may have been near the scene. May have been. You withdrew $5,000 before the murder. So did she. Your account received $5,000 after her death. I don't know why. You cleaned your car 2 days after. That proves nothing. No. It doesn't. But everything together is becoming difficult to explain. Mercer looked down. For the first time, he appeared tired, not frightened, not angry, just tired. I have spent my whole life knowing this day might come. The room became still. Mitchell carefully watched him. What day? The day someone decides they already know the answer. Do you expect me to believe you are innocent? I expect you to prove I'm guilty. The interview ended. No confession. No arrest. But something had changed. Mercer was no longer simply a person of interest. He was the center of the investigation. The district attorney reviewed the evidence. The conclusion was frustrating. There was enough for suspicion, not enough for charges. The fingerprint was powerful, but fingerprints prove contact, not murder. The money was suspicious, but suspicious is not illegal. The timeline was concerning, but concern is not conviction. The case remained suspended. Again, Mitchell refused to accept another failure. She returned to the original crime scene photographs. She studied the warehouse door, the fingerprint, the angle, the height. Something bothered her. The print was on the inside edge of the maintenance door, not the outside. That meant whoever left it was likely standing inside the warehouse, not outside. The original investigators assumed the killer entered through that door. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if someone had been inside before Emily arrived? She ordered a complete reconstruction. The warehouse layout, the entrances, the windows, the possible paths. The result surprised everyone. The maintenance door was not the easiest way inside. It was the easiest way to hide. A person standing inside the warehouse could see anyone approaching from the service road without being noticed. The fingerprint may not have belonged to someone breaking in. It may have belonged to someone waiting for Emily. A new theory formed. Emily may not have been randomly attacked. She may have agreed to meet someone she knew, someone she trusted enough to follow into that dark place. The investigation returned to the anonymous note. I know this is difficult. Please trust me. Everything will be over after Sunday. The phrase changed meaning. If Emily believed she was meeting someone to resolve a problem, she might have gone willingly. She might not have realized the danger. The handwriting analysis continued. Experts compared the note with dozens of known samples. Mercer's handwriting showed similarities, but similarities were not identification. The examiner needed more. Then another discovery emerged. Emily's sister found an old box stored in her attic. She had forgotten about it for decades. Inside were letters Emily had written during her final year of life. Most were ordinary. Family updates, school stories, personal thoughts. One letter had never been sent. It was addressed to someone who needs to understand. No name. The letter was unfinished. The first line read, I never wanted this to become something ugly. Investigators carefully examined every word. The second sentence was more disturbing. You promised me it would end. The letter ended abruptly. No signature. No conclusion. But now a terrifying possibility emerged. Emily may not have been dealing with a stranger. She may have been trapped in a situation that had been escalating for months. And someone had promised her it would stop. The task force searched every surviving record connected to Emily's relationships, former classmates, co-workers, neighbors, volunteers. One name repeatedly appeared in old social calendars. Not Daniel Mercer. Someone else. A man whose name had never appeared in the original investigation. A man who had moved out of California only weeks after Emily's death. A man who had never been interviewed. When detectives located him, they discovered something shocking. He had a connection to Daniel Mercer. A financial connection. A business connection. And possibly a connection to the missing $5,000. The investigation that had focused on one unlikely suspect for months suddenly opened another direction, because maybe Daniel Mercer wasn't the person who left the fingerprint. Maybe he was only protecting someone else. And somewhere inside the forgotten pages of 1987, the real reason Emily Carson died was still waiting to be uncovered. The name that appeared in the old records was Thomas Avery. Unlike Daniel Mercer, Avery was not a respected figure in the community, but he was not a criminal either, at least not officially. In 1987, Thomas Avery was 34 years old and worked as a freelance property consultant. He specialized in helping small businesses purchase abandoned buildings, negotiate contracts, and manage financial transitions. His name appeared only briefly in the original investigation. A single line inside an interview summary. Thomas Avery, interviewed regarding warehouse ownership records. No connection established. The original detectives had moved on quickly. Avery had seemed irrelevant. But 37 years later, investigators saw the sentence differently. No connection established. Not the same as no connection existed. The reopened investigation uncovered that Avery had handled financial paperwork related to the abandoned warehouse district. He knew the buildings. He knew the access points. He knew which doors were unlocked. And most importantly, he knew Daniel Mercer. The two men had worked together on several small investment projects during the late 1980s. They were not close friends. They were business associates. The kind of relationship that often leaves behind paperwork. And paperwork was exactly what investigators found. A partnership agreement from September 1987, 1 month before Emily's murder. Mercer had invested money into a property venture managed by Avery. The amount? $5,000. The same amount appearing throughout the case. Investigators immediately questioned whether the money connected Emily to the business arrangement, but the evidence was unclear. Mercer's withdrawal, Emily's withdrawal, the post-murder deposit, 3 separate financial events, 1 number, 1 mystery. Mitchell contacted Avery. He agreed to an interview. He was now 71 years old, living quietly in Oregon. When investigators arrived at his home, they noticed something immediately. Avery was nervous before they even mentioned the case. "You know why we're here," Mitchell said. Avery looked toward the floor. "I assumed someone would eventually ask." The sentence surprised her. "Why?" "Because of Daniel." "Why because of Daniel?" Avery remained silent. The interview changed direction. "What was your relationship with Daniel Mercer?" "Business." "Only business?" "Mostly." "Did you know Emily Carson?" Avery hesitated. "I knew who she was." "How?" "Everyone knew about the murder." "That's not what I asked." Avery looked away. "She volunteered at the community center. Did you ever meet her?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Mitchell noticed. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Because we found records placing you near the community center during that period. I worked in that area." "Did Emily ever contact you?" "No." "Did Daniel ever mention her?" Another pause. "Not until after she died." The room became quiet. "What did he say?" Avery rubbed his hands together. "He asked me if I had heard anything." "Anything about what?" "The investigation." "Why would he ask you?" "I don't know." "Because you had nothing to do with it?" "Yes." "Or because you knew something?" Avery said nothing. Investigators left the interview without an arrest, but they left with something valuable. Avery had confirmed one thing. Daniel Mercer and Thomas Avery discussed Emily Carson after murder. The original investigation never knew. Back at headquarters, Mitchell reviewed every connection between the two men. The timeline became more complicated. Avery had access to the warehouse. Mercer had the fingerprint. Emily had the money. Someone had deposited $5,000 into Mercer's account after the murder. Now a second person existed inside the mystery. The possibility of a larger conspiracy emerged. The district attorney demanded caution. Cold cases often create illusions. Two suspicious people do not automatically equal two guilty people. Investigators needed to know exactly what happened on October 18, 1987. They returned the warehouse, not the current location. The original blueprints. The building had contained multiple storage rooms. One room stood apart from the others. A small office hidden behind the maintenance corridor. The room had no windows, no obvious purpose. But according to old property records, Avery had access to it. Why? Because he once used it to store documents during a failed real estate project. The original detectives searched the warehouse thoroughly, but they focused on the murder scene, not the surrounding spaces. The hidden office had been empty, or so everyone believed. A forensic review of old photographs revealed something unusual. A filing cabinet inside the office was partially open. At the time, investigators assumed it belonged to the abandoned building, but property records showed the cabinet had been removed after the murder. Nobody documented what was inside. Nobody knew where it went. The contents had vanished. A missing cabinet, a missing planner page, a missing envelope, a missing $5,000. Too many missing pieces. Investigators began searching Avery's old business records. Most had disappeared, but one archive box survived in a storage facility outside Portland. Inside were decades-old contracts, property maps, client information, and one handwritten note dated October 17, 1987, the day before Emily's death. The note contained only one sentence. Sunday meeting moved. Same location. Bring documents. No name. No signature. But the location was written beneath it. The old warehouse address. Mitchell stared at the page. The mystery was changing again. Emily may not have been lured to the warehouse. She may have gone there for a meeting involving documents. And money. The next question became obvious. What documents? Investigators searched Emily's belongings again. This time they focused on her work as a teacher. School records, personal files, volunteer documents. They found something unusual. 3 weeks before her death, Emily had requested copies of old financial paperwork from a community center. Why would a teacher need financial records? Nobody knew. The community center director at the time had died. The current administration had no explanation, but the request existed, written in Emily's handwriting. The date matched the beginning of her conflict with someone, the same period when her journal changed, the same period when she wrote. Some people refused to hear the word no. Mitchell started to believe Emily had discovered something involving money, something involving documents, something that made someone afraid. The investigation shifted away from a random murder. Emily Carson may have uncovered a secret powerful enough to silence her. Investigators returned to Mercer. This time, they focused less on proving he was a killer. They focused on understanding his relationship with Avery. Mercer's financial history revealed another surprise. Between 1986 and 1987, he transferred several large payments to Avery's property company. But after Emily's death, those payments stopped. Completely, a business relationship that had existed for years ended within weeks. Why? No one knew. Mercer refused another interview. His attorney issued a statement saying that after decades of cooperation, Mercer believed investigators were unfairly targeting him based on incomplete evidence. The statement ended with one sentence. Mr. Mercer has spent 37 years living with a tragedy he did not commit. The media finally learned the case had reopened. Headlines exploded. California cold case takes shocking turn. Decades-old fingerprint revives murder investigation. Former accountant questioned after new evidence. The public reacted instantly. Some believed Mercer was guilty. Others defended him. Neighbors described him as impossible to imagine committing violence. But investigators knew something the public did not. The case was no longer about whether Daniel Mercer looked guilty. It was about what happened behind closed doors in 1987. And the answer was hidden somewhere between three people: Emily Carson, Daniel Mercer, Thomas Avery. Then forensic analysts discovered something inside the anonymous note, a detail missed for nearly 40 years, a microscopic indentation beneath the paper, a pressure mark left by another page written on top of it. Using specialized imaging technology, investigators reconstructed the hidden writing. The words were incomplete, but 3 letters were visible, a name fragment: Tom. For the first time, evidence did not point only toward Mercer. It pointed toward Thomas Avery. And suddenly, the man who had once been considered irrelevant became the person investigators feared they had overlooked from the very beginning. The discovery of the hidden name fragment changed the entire direction of the investigation. For months, Daniel Mercer had been the center of every theory. His fingerprint, his timeline, his missing planner page, his unexplained money. Every road seemed to lead back to him. Then 3 letters appeared. Tom, a name hidden beneath the surface of a forgotten note, a name that had been buried for 37 years. Thomas Avery, the man who had never been considered a serious suspect, the man who had been mentioned only once in the original investigation, the man who had quietly disappeared from California shortly after Emily Carson's death. Mitchell immediately ordered a complete re-examination of Avery's history. Not rumors, not assumptions. Facts. Every business record, every property transaction, every financial connection, every address, every person connected to him. The first discovery came from a company registration file. In 1987, Avery operated a small consulting business called Westbridge Property Solutions. On paper, the company helped investors purchase and renovate abandoned commercial buildings. But investigators discovered something strange. The company had almost no legitimate clients. Most of its money came from private investors. One of those investors was Daniel Mercer. Another was a silent partner whose name appeared nowhere in the original investigation, a man named Richard Cole. Richard Cole had died in 2009, but his financial record survived, and those records revealed something disturbing. 3 weeks before Emily's death, Cole transferred $10,000 into Avery's business account. 2 days later, Avery transferred $5,000 to Mercer. Then, after Emily's murder, Mercer's account received $5,000 in cash. The money trail was incomplete, but the pattern was becoming impossible to dismiss. Investigators now believed the missing money might not have been stolen from Emily. It might have been connected to a larger financial arrangement, a deal, a secret, something Emily discovered. The next step was understanding why she was involved. Detectives searched Emily's personal files again. They found copies of letters she had written to the community center board. The letters were polite, professional, but the tone changed over time. The first letter asked simple questions, financial questions, where donations were being allocated, why certain expenses had increased, why volunteer funds were being moved between accounts. The second letter was more direct. She requested a full review of financial records. The third letter was never sent. Only a draft remained. The opening sentence was chilling. I cannot continue pretending I do not know what is happening. Investigators stared at the document. Emily was not searching for personal answers. She was investigating something. The question became, what had she found? The community center had received thousands of dollars in donations every year. Much of it came from local businesses, including companies connected to Daniel Mercer and Thomas Avery. Emily was a volunteer. She had access to basic financial documents. She was not an accountant. She was not a detective. But she was organized, and she noticed things other people ignored. Missing receipts, unexplained transfers, payments that did not match official records. The investigation developed a new theory. Emily discovered financial misconduct involving people she trusted. She confronted someone. Someone tried to make the problem disappear, and the confrontation ended with murder. But who killed her? Mercer? Avery? Both? Or someone else entirely? Investigators returned to the warehouse, the place where everything ended. Modern technology allowed them to recreate the building digitally. The maintenance door, the hidden office, the loading area, the route from the street, the location where Emily's body was found. Then analysts noticed something. The fingerprint on the maintenance door was positioned at shoulder height. The person who left it was likely standing inside the building, facing outward, waiting. The question was no longer how someone entered. The question was, who was waiting for Emily? Avery knew the warehouse. Mercer had the fingerprint. Both had possible motives. But only one person had a documented reason to meet someone there, Thomas Avery. The handwritten note mentioned a Sunday meeting. The warehouse address. Bring documents. The date matched the day Emily disappeared. Investigators searched Avery's old phone records. Unlike Mercer, Avery's records showed one surviving call. A call made the evening before the murder, to a public phone near Emily's home. The duration, 1 minute and 12 seconds. The same pay phone connected to the earlier mystery calls. Mitchell felt the case shifting again. Emily had been communicating with someone using public phones, someone avoiding a direct connection. The original investigators had focused on strangers. They never considered that the people involved may have been hiding behind ordinary appearances. Avery was interviewed again. This time, he was not calm. He appeared frustrated. I already told you everything. You told us you didn't know Emily. I didn't. You knew she was investigating the community center. Avery said nothing. Why? Because everyone knew. Everyone. People talked. About what? About money. The room became quiet. What money? Avery looked toward the window. I don't know. You're lying. You can't prove that. Maybe not. But we can prove you were connected to the financial records Emily questioned. Avery leaned back. That doesn't mean I killed her. No. It doesn't. But it means you had a reason to fear what you found. Avery shook his head. You have no idea what happened. The sentence caught Mitchell's attention. Not. I don't know what happened. Not. I had nothing to do with it. Instead, you have no idea what happened. A statement that suggested knowledge. Then tell us. Avery remained silent. The interview ended. But detectives left with something more valuable than a confession. They left with doubt. Avery was hiding something. The question was what? The investigation searched Avery's former residences. Most were gone. But one property remained connected to him, a storage unit outside Sacramento. The unit had been abandoned for years. Inside were old business documents, photographs, and personal belongings. Among the items was a locked metal box. Inside the box, a collection of letters, a newspaper clipping about Emily Carson's murder, and a photograph. The photograph showed Emily, standing outside the community center, talking with someone. The image quality was poor, but investigators enhanced it. The person standing beside her was clearly visible, Thomas Avery. The date on the back of the photograph, September 14th, 1987. 1 month before the murder. The discovery changed everything. Avery had not simply known about Emily. He had interacted with her, frequently enough to appear in a photograph, yet he denied ever meeting her. The lie was finally confirmed. Investigators returned to the storage unit evidence. The metal box contained one final item, a small envelope. No address, No name. Only a handwritten message. If anything happens to me, look at the records. Inside was a single piece of paper, a list of dates, payments, names, and at the bottom, Emily Carson's signature. She had created a record of everything she believed was wrong, a record someone desperately wanted destroyed. The case had finally found its center, not a random attack, not a mystery with no motive, a hidden financial scheme, a secret partnership, and a woman who discovered too much. But one question remained. If Emily had uncovered the truth, why did the evidence keep pointing to Daniel Mercer? Because the fingerprint belonged to him, because the money reached his account, because his story contained holes. And now investigators face the most difficult possibility of all. Thomas Avery may have had the motive, but Daniel Mercer may have been the person who stood at the door that night. And if that was true, then the cold case was not about finding one killer. It was about uncovering two people who had spent nearly 4 decades protecting the same secret. For 37 years, the murder of Emily Carson had been described as a mystery without direction, a teacher killed in the darkness, a fingerprint with no owner, a crime scene with no witnesses, a case buried beneath decades of silence. But now investigators were looking at something far more complicated. Emily had not been randomly chosen. She had found something. She had documented something. And before she died, she had tried to make sure the truth survived. The metal box recovered from Thomas Avery's abandoned storage unit became the most important discovery in the investigation. Inside were financial records that should not have existed, copies of documents, handwritten notes, meeting schedules, and a personal timeline Emily had created herself. Detectives carefully examined every page. The handwriting was unmistakably Emily's. The dates matched transactions from the community center. The names matched people connected to the financial network. One name appeared repeatedly, Daniel Mercer. Another appeared even more frequently, Thomas Avery. Emily had not been investigating strangers. She had been investigating people she knew. The documents revealed a pattern. Money donated to the community center was allegedly being transferred through several small businesses before returning through investment accounts. On paper, the transactions looked legitimate, but Emily noticed something. Some payments existed only in records, not in reality. Supplies that were never purchased, services that were never provided, invoices connected to companies that had no employees. She had uncovered a system designed to hide money in plain sight. The community center was not just a place where people gathered. It had become the center of a financial scheme. Emily had written one sentence in her notes. They believe nobody checks because nobody cares. That sentence changed how investigators viewed her final days. She was not afraid because someone disliked her. She was afraid because she knew something, and someone knew she knew. The next major breakthrough came from analyzing the hidden documents. One transaction immediately stood out. October 17, 1987, the day before Emily disappeared. A payment of $10,000 was transferred from an account connected to Avery's business. The destination, an account controlled by Daniel Mercer. The reason, consulting services. But investigators found no evidence any consulting work had occurred. Then came the most disturbing detail. The payment was divided. $5,000 remained in Mercer's account. $5,000 was withdrawn in cash, the exact amount Emily withdrew before her death. Investigators believed they were finally seeing the outline of the plan, but they still lacked the most important piece. Who actually killed Emily? The evidence against Mercer remained strong. His fingerprint, his false statement, his financial connection, the vehicle possibly seen near the scene, the car cleaning afterward. But Avery's involvement was growing. He had lied about knowing Emily. He had access to the warehouse. He had created the financial system she uncovered. The possibility of two people working together became impossible to ignore. Mitchell requested a full background investigation into Avery and Mercer as a pair. The results revealed something unexpected. They had known each other for more than 10 years. Not casually. Closely. They met through a failed property investment in the late 1970s. Over the years, they built a pattern. Avery handled property deals. Mercer handled finances. Together, they moved money through complicated networks. Nothing illegal had ever been proven until Emily began asking questions. Investigators contacted former employees of Avery's companies. One former assistant provided a statement that changed everything. I remember Daniel being afraid of Thomas. Afraid? Yes. Why? Because Thomas always controlled the money. Daniel was the accountant. Why would he be afraid? The woman looked down. Because Daniel knew too much. The statement created a new possibility. Maybe Mercer was not the mastermind. Maybe he was trapped. Maybe he was involved, but not in control. The investigation returned to the fingerprint. Forensic experts examined the location where it was found. The maintenance door was not near the body. It was inside a narrow corridor. Someone standing there would have been separated from the main warehouse area. The killer could have waited there unseen, but investigators noticed something else. The fingerprint was not mixed with other prints. No fingerprints from workers. No fingerprints from trespassers. Only one clear print, Mercer's. Why? Because someone had cleaned the door. The original investigators never considered it, but modern analysis showed something unusual. The surrounding surface contained old dust patterns, except around the fingerprint. A small area had been wiped. Someone had cleaned the door before leaving, except for one place, the fingerprint. A deliberate mistake, a message, or an accident. Nobody knew, but one possibility emerged. Someone wanted investigators to find Mercer's fingerprint. The print might not have been left by the killer. It might have been planted. The discovery shocked the task force. For years, everyone assumed the fingerprint was the answer. Now it might have been the biggest deception in the entire case. Mitchell immediately ordered another interview with Mercer. This time, she brought evidence of Avery's involvement. Mercer sat quietly as photographs of the documents were placed in front of him. His expression changed. Not fear, recognition. You knew about this. Silence. Daniel. I knew Thomas had problems. Financial problems? Yes. Did Emily discover them? Another silence. Did she confront you? Mercer closed his eyes briefly. She was a good person. The answer confused investigators. That's not what I asked. No. He looked toward the table. You don't understand. Then explain. Mercer finally spoke. I tried to stop it. Stop what? What Thomas was doing. Why didn't you tell police? His voice became quieter. Because I was afraid. Of Thomas? Yes. Or because you were involved? Mercer did not answer. That silence was more revealing than any statement. Investigators pushed harder. What happened that night? Mercer looked exhausted. I didn't kill Emily. Did you meet her? Another pause. Yes. The room froze. For 37 years, Mercer denied knowing her. Now he admitted they met. When? That night. Where? The warehouse. Why? She asked me to come. Why would she ask you? Because she thought I could help. Help with what? Mercer looked down. The money. Did Avery know about the meeting? No answer. Daniel. He knew. The confession changed the entire case. Mercer had finally admitted he was there, but he still denied murder. He claimed Emily contacted him because she discovered the financial scheme. She believed Mercer was the only person who could help expose Avery. According to Mercer, he arrived at the warehouse expecting a conversation, not a confrontation, not violence. But when he arrived, Emily was already afraid. She said Thomas had threatened her. Mercer continued. She said he knew she had the documents. Then what happened? I heard someone behind me. Who? Mercer looked up. Thomas. The name hung in the room. Did Thomas attack her? Mercer closed his eyes. I don't remember everything. How convenient. I remember Emily falling. After Thomas hit her? Silence. Daniel. I said I don't remember. The investigators knew they had reached a critical point. Mercer had finally broken 37 years of silence. But his story created another mystery. If Thomas Avery killed Emily, why was Mercer's fingerprint the only one found? Why did the money end up in his account? Why did he lie for decades? And why did he allow the world to believe he was a killer? Because maybe he was protecting Avery. Or maybe he was protecting himself. The next morning, investigators returned to Thomas Avery. But this time, they were no longer asking questions. They were preparing an arrest. Because after 37 years, the cold case was finally moving toward the truth. And the truth was far darker than anyone expected. The arrest warrant for Thomas Avery was prepared before sunrise. After 37 years of unanswered questions, investigators finally believed they understood the hidden structure behind Emily Carson's death. But believing was not enough. Cold cases were built on patience, not emotion, not anger, not the desire to close a chapter. Every piece had to survive the courtroom. Every accusation had to be supported. Every memory had to be tested. The evidence against Avery was powerful. The financial scheme, the hidden documents, the lies about knowing Emily, the warehouse connection, the anonymous note, the photograph, the testimony from Daniel Mercer. But one problem remained. The prosecution needed to explain one thing above everything else. Why was Daniel Mercer's fingerprint found at the scene? Because a jury would ask the same question investigators had asked for decades. If Thomas Avery was responsible, why did the evidence point toward Mercer? The answer came from Mercer himself. But it was not the answer anyone expected. After his confession, Mercer agreed to provide a full statement. Not a deal, not immunity, just the truth. For the first time in 37 years, he described what happened on October 18, 1987. He said Emily contacted him because she had discovered financial irregularities connected to the community center. She believed Avery was moving donated money through fake companies. She believed Mercer had unknowingly helped create the system. Mercer admitted that part. He had handled financial documents. He had processed payments. He had ignored questions he should have asked. But he claimed he never knew the full scale of the operation. Emily wanted to expose everything. She believed Mercer could help her prove it. That was why she asked him to meet at the warehouse, away from other people, away from anyone connected to Avery. Mercer told investigators he arrived around 9:30 p.m. The weather was already getting worse. Rain covered the streets. Emily was waiting near the entrance. She carried a folder. Inside were copies of financial records. She was angry, but not afraid. At least not at first. Then Avery arrived. Mercer said Avery had followed him, or perhaps had followed Emily. He did not know. But the moment Avery appeared, everything changed. According to Mercer, Avery demanded the documents. Emily refused. The argument escalated. Then violence began. Mercer claimed he stepped away. He claimed he tried to stop it. But he admitted one thing. He touched the maintenance door. He entered the warehouse. He was there. The fingerprint finally had an explanation. Not planted. Not fake. Mercer had left it. But he insisted he was not the killer. Investigators asked a question that had haunted the case. Why didn't you call police? Mercer had no simple answer. Because there wasn't one. Fear. Guilt. Shame. Self-preservation. All of it existed at the same time. I knew if I told the truth, my life was over, Mercer said. You were afraid of prison? No. He looked down. I was afraid everyone would know what I had done. That statement became one of the most important moments in the investigation, because Mercer was admitting something. Not murder, but involvement. He had hidden the truth. He had protected a criminal. He had allowed Emily's family to wait decades for answers. The investigators still needed confirmation. They needed Avery. Thomas Avery was arrested outside his home in Oregon on a quiet Tuesday morning. There were no dramatic scenes, no shouting, no escape attempt. He simply looked at the officers approaching his driveway, as if he had been expecting them. The news spread within hours. Headlines appeared across the country. 37-year cold case cracked. Arrest shocks California community. Forgotten fingerprint leads police to unexpected suspect. Teacher's murder investigation takes stunning turn. For the first time in decades, Emily Carson's name was everywhere again, but for her family. The attention came with complicated emotions. They had wanted answers. They had prayed for justice. But they never expected the truth to involve people Emily had trusted. The trial preparation lasted months. Prosecutors built their case carefully. They did not portray Avery as a mysterious monster. They described something more realistic. A man who built a financial scheme. A man who feared exposure. A man who chose silence over accountability. The defense attacked the investigation. They questioned old memories. They challenged the reliability of decades-old evidence. They argued that Mercer was responsible and was blaming Avery to save himself. That argument created a major problem for prosecutors, because Mercer was not innocent. He had lied. For decades, the defense repeated the same phrase again and again. How can anyone believe a man who spent 37 years hiding the truth? The prosecution had no perfect answer, because it was true. Mercer had hidden the truth. The question was whether he had hidden it because he was guilty of murder or because he was guilty of fear. The jury heard every detail. The fingerprint, the money, the documents, the witnesses, the photographs, the hidden note, the financial records. The final piece came from a forensic review of the old planner page removed from Mercer's 1987 calendar. Experts examined the torn edges. They discovered something unexpected. The page had been removed recently, not in 1987. The planner had been damaged decades later. Someone had attempted to hide the contents after the investigation reopened. The question became, who had access? Mercer, Avery, or someone protecting them? Investigators traced the damage. The planner had been stored in Mercer's home until the search warrant. No one else had access. Mercer had removed the page recently. The revelation devastated his credibility. During testimony, prosecutors confronted him. Mr. Mercer, why did you destroy evidence? Mercer sat silently for several seconds. Then he answered, because I was still afraid. Of Thomas Avery? Yes. After 37 years? Mercer looked toward the jury. Some people spend their whole lives afraid of the same person. The courtroom became silent. The statement was emotional. But emotion was not evidence. The jury had to decide. Was Mercer a victim? A criminal? A witness? Or something in between? Then Thomas Avery finally spoke. After months of silence, he chose to testify. The courtroom expected confession. Instead, Avery denied everything. He claimed Emily was unstable. He claimed Mercer acted alone. He claimed the financial documents were misunderstood. He claimed the photograph proved nothing. He claimed everyone was looking for someone to blame. But one question destroyed his defense. The prosecutor placed the old photograph on the screen. Emily Carson, Thomas Avery, standing together. September 1987. Mr. Avery, why did you tell investigators you never met Emily Carson? Avery stared at the image. No answer. The prosecutor repeated the question. Still nothing. The silence lasted almost 20 seconds. Then Avery finally spoke. I didn't remember. A weak answer. A familiar answer. The same answer that had appeared throughout the investigation. I don't remember. I don't know. I can't explain. The jury noticed. Everyone noticed. A pattern built over decades. Not one mistake. Not one forgotten detail. A lifetime of avoiding the truth. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was filled. Emily's family sat in the front row. Investigators watched quietly. Thomas Avery entered wearing a dark suit. The judge looked toward the jury. Have you reached a decision? The foreperson stood. The room held its breath. The verdict was read. Guilty. After 37 years, the cold case was finally solved. But the ending was not simple, because one question remained. What about Daniel Mercer, the man whose fingerprints started everything? The man who lied. The man who knew. The man who finally told the truth. Justice had arrived. But not completely. Because solving a murder does not erase the years lost. It does not return a daughter to her parents. It does not restore the childhood memories of students who waited for a teacher who never came back. And it does not remove the haunting reality that the truth had been sitting inside a forgotten fingerprint, waiting for someone to finally look closely enough